All right, so we are officially live, and I'm here with the one and only HR Gangsta, the HR Gangsta, Katrina Ghazarian. And Katrina, so you do these theme songs when you go out, and I have one for you. Let me see if you could hear this.
Okay.
Can you hear it?
Uh-uh.
Well, we messed that one up. So I
You gotta
wanted to
hold
play
it to
for
the
you.
mic. You have to in order for
I
the
have
sound.
Yeah, it's I messed that one up, and here's why.
Okay.
Because like I told you, I was having some audio difficulties, so I switched my mic, and it's in my board, and it didn't come through. I wanted to play for you, and I'll probably pull it up before, but damn, it feels good to be a gangsta by the Ghetto Boys. Because one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on is I was on a couple of clubhouses with you. I've also seen a ton of your podcast, and you have just come out of left field with something at a topic that I think is really cool, and that's that HR sucks.
Hmm.
And I thought, and you have a podcast, a very popular podcast. So I wanted to have you on because you're such a refreshing voice on this topic. So you went from 14 years old, being a sandwich artist, to the funniest fifth grader,
Yeah.
to having a really popular podcast, HR Sucks. So I want to just thank you for coming out. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How did you know that I worked at Subway?
I did my research.
Where do I have that? I don't even know where I have that up.
I I did my research, my friend. So
Yeah, that is so funny because I don't know if I talk about that a lot, but my very first job was working at a Subway.
so you'll remember, you maybe if I remind you, you might remember talking about it. So I want to say it might have been your very first podcast. But
Look at you.
you talked about how you left some stuff out because you had to get out of there really fast and you let some stuff spoil. So I was like 14 years old. So it's an interesting thing, but one of the observations I made with people who do really well in the workforce is they started really, really early.
Mhm.
And because they had to, for whatever reason, they needed money. There was like a different mindset in the family household. So what I've
Mhm.
always resonated with, and people that I've always just really gotten along with, are people who have just crushed it in the workforce early on. My wife's a really good example of this. Like, she came up, and I think she was at Dairy Queen at 14 years old, and I'm like, that's 14 years old, but that was me. I was working early on too. So yeah, so thank you for coming on. I really do appreciate you being here today.
No, it's good to be here.
So let's start off with, you have a really cool podcast, and you usually stay on this theme of HR sucking. And the first question I have is, how did you come up with that title? And then I got a ton of questions that I want to talk about this, but let's start there. How did you come up with that title?
So I knew I wanted to have a podcast, and one of my friends was willing to be the first guest. And so I go to, he's like a CEO of a e-commerce company. So I go to his office, we do this recording. I still don't really have a name. And so we're kind of walking out, and he like made this comment. He was like, HR sucks. And I'm like, oh my God. It's literally on film because he had like a videographer there also. And the videographer has it on film where I'm like, that's it. That is going to be the name of this podcast. It's HR sucks. And it's so fitting for me and my personality. And I think that it is a conversation starter. I
Mhm.
the fear was, our HR professional is going to be upset about a title like that.
Mhm.
And then I kind of went back and I was, oh look, I don't care. and so and so I went with it. I went with the title, and that's kind of what it's been.
So does it suck from the perspective of working in HR? Does it suck from the perspective of if you're a corporate employee and you have HR kind of, in the background looming? Does it suck from that perspective? Which perspective do you come from, or is it both?
It's a little bit of both. So it's HR sucks for employees, generally speaking, for the most part, and that's a combination of leadership issues and HR professionals to where HR is only called upon when something bad is happening.
Yep.
Um, so it sucks from that perspective. It sucks from the perspective of HR is consistently left out of from having a seat at the table with corporate leaders and being able to make decisions on behalf of the employees. They're not really taken as serious as, you know, a COO, a CFO, CMO, and all of those. So that kind of, it sucks from that perspective. It sucks from a business leadership perspective in that they're just consistently unhappy with HR in general. They don't really understand what they're supposed to do aside from being like the babysitters of the company. And usually we associate that with like avoidance, right? We're avoiding HR. Like this whole ethos of HR is avoid HR as much as possible. And so for me, it was fitting all the way around, whether you were an employee, you were in HR, or you were a corporate leader. I think that the sentiment was still very the same across and consistent across the board.
So when you think about, like, because you said something, and I actually have it written down here. You actually said, I love this quote, but you wrote, CEOs and founders are so self-involved in their own personal success that they have become condescending and detached from the people that are keeping their companies alive. And that's such a powerful statement for me, because you know, when you think about it, and you know, someone said a long time ago, I think it might have been Herb Kelleher, who is the CEO of Southwest Airlines, or was. He was like the founder and CEO. I think he's passed away now. But he said something interesting. He said, I think it was him, so I could be wrong, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but like when you look at an org chart, you got to flip it over. And that's really the way that it should be, is the people are at the top.
Agreed.
And you gotta really, you know, and you're saying that somehow over time has become detached from, you know, from the way that it works in corporate America. And so what do you think about that? I mean, in terms of, tell me about that and how you came to that thought process.
I think it's a combination of multiple things that have launched in over the last few decades. And so we've definitely learned how to automate so many processes and procedures with technology. And, you know, I think what has happened is we try to find ways to automate the employee experience or the employee, you know, engagement. And so a lot of companies and CEOs, you know, they're so focused on looking like they're a great employer, but not enough on actually being a great employer. And so they throw all of these cosmetic solutions at their employees, like a very beautiful office, or, you know, a pool table, or what, you know, snacks, and the kitchen looks really neat, an espresso machine, and like all of these materialistic things that are really taking from the connectivity to the employees. You know, when you're constantly throwing things at people and you're not really putting a lot of focus in, do these employees feel like they're valued? Do they feel their work is important? Are they happy here? Why aren't they happy here? Do they have great relationships with their coworkers? Do they feel like they're aligned with their passions? Like when you're not really taking the time to answer or find the answers to these questions, you create a very disconnected culture. And so that is why the global statistic is, well, this was January 2020. I don't know what it would be at this point. I don't think they came out with the new study, but it was 59% of the global workforce is disengaged.
That's insane.
And yeah, that is really insane, right? Like if you're a company and you have 10 employees and 6 of your 10 employees don't really care if the company makes it or not, like you have a big problem. And so that statistic really got to me because that's a lot of sad people. If you're disengaged from your work, I'm sure you've had these experiences when you were working for an organization, and it may not even be the organization's fault necessarily. It could be that you're just not doing what you are happy to do. Like you're just not in the work that you feel the most aligned with. That you're very sad. Like most of your day is pretty sad. You're constantly thinking about it. Even when you're not working, you're thinking about it. When you're showering, you're thinking about it. When you're at home with your family, trying to play with your kids, you're not present with them because you're thinking about it. And so for me, the 59% was staggering, that 59% of people are unhappy. And that was something I really wanted to change. I really set out to, make that specific metric better.
So do you consult CEOs? Do you have that ability? I mean, if you were to talk to a CEO, well, that's the first question. But then the second question, if you what do you tell a CEO today? Like, you got 60% of your staff disengaged. How do you re-engage with that? And to your point, it's not necessarily just throwing food at them or throwing, gym memberships at them. How do you really re-engage your people as a leader?
I mean, number one, you need to ask them what they want. It sounds
Mm-hmm.
simple, right? It sounds very simple, but there are a high percentage of organizations that are not conducting climate surveys. And so the purpose of climate surveys is number one, you find out what people are really feeling, what they want, what they don't want, what they value, how valued they feel, how satisfied they are. Would they recommend a friend or a family member to work for this organization? You find out like all of how connected they are to the organization as a whole. And then you build initiatives around that, and so in order to increase engagement, find out what they want. Now you have a benchmark, like what is the engagement? Is it 60% is disengaged or whatever that metric is going to be? Take the data, present the data, to the entire organization so they know that the time that they've spent answering these questions wholeheartedly and honestly, there's a payoff to it. And so present all of the data to them, take accountability as an organization, like, hey, 75% of you said that you feel like you're not appreciated enough. Mm-hmm. We hear you, we recognize it, and we are committed to changing that. And so now you're building initiatives around specifically your employees, what it is that they want. Now, is it going to be 100%? No, never. It will never be 100%. However, if you have, 75% people feeling like they're not appreciated, and if you can, decrease that amount to 50%, well, now you have a 25% delta of productivity, because when employees feel valued and appreciated, they're far more productive, they're in tune, they're focused, they're being more creative. Mm-hmm. And so if you look at it from a revenue standpoint, if you make $1 million a year and you increase that by 25% just by, shifting some of your initiatives or implementing, some type of, weekly award or something like that, now you're a 1.250 company just by doing that, which costs you very little, if anything at all. It probably could have been you just need to scrap something else that you're doing that nobody gives a shit about and put all of your focus into this. So when I talk to CEOs, so number one, yes, we do that. We create the climate surveys, we administer them, which from a third party standpoint is very valuable because employees are more likely to answer honestly because of retaliation when a third party is the one that is collecting the answers and the responses. We put together all of the data. We look at all of the data points. We put together the presentation that the organization is going to be presenting to their entire, team. And we help them set deadlines for initiatives. We help them roll out the initiatives, and then we keep remeasuring every quarter.
That's amazing. Hold on, I got a question for you. So I don't know if you could see it on your screen there, but do you find giving more responsibility and autonomy of some kind of transactional authority to act in the best interest of the organization is a good way to re-engage on the mission of the organization and build up happiness with employees? So what are your thoughts on that?
Theoretically, sure, that will work, but you still need to find out what they want. Like you still need to, every organization is so different. There's made up of different people, different ages, different backgrounds, different communities. And not only that, but they also evolve over time. So even all this, what you're doing now, you have to keep in mind, you may have to change it next year because now maybe before 20% of your employees were parents. Well, hey, pandemic, spending a lot of time together. Yeah. Now 40% of your demographic are parents. And so now you're going to have to build initiatives around catering to that 40% a little more. So I think that if you conduct a survey and the responses come back of, we don't feel valued, we feel like we're not being challenged, we are being micromanaged, we don't really get to be creative. And so when you have an area where they feel like they want more responsibility and they want more autonomy, Now you can put initiatives around it, but you can't do anything unless you find out what they want and what your weaknesses are.
That's good. No, I love that. So I'm going to shift it up just a little bit on you, because I'm really curious about you and how you ended up getting into this line of work, and where did it start? I know we started as a sandwich artist, but then where did you go from there, and how did you land doing and consulting, because you're doing so much right now and you've done an amazing job. I'm just curious about how that came about.
Sure. I mean, I was in sports. I coached basketball. I was a basketball official. At some point I needed to get a real job, I suppose. And I ended up I was hired by a third party recruiting firm. And I think I was able to activate some of those coaching abilities of matching candidates to organizations. I was really in tune with the emotional, behavioral aspects of a candidate, and then what the emotional and behavioral culture was at the organization. And so I was very quickly able to determine if this person was going to be successful in this organization or not. And it wasn't always because they had bad traits, or it wasn't that. It was just like what culture was going to complement them as a person. So I started, working with all of these placements, and then a client that I had been working with, they poached me essentially. And they're like, "Hey, we have this whole portfolio of companies. We're paying an 85% markup on these candidates. I'm sure you're not seeing any of that. You're not getting paid that much. So why don't you come on over, work for us? We'll give you salary. You don't have to worry about sales anymore." Because that's what third party recruiting is. It's sales, whether people want to admit it or not. So I started working for them, and then they launched another business and during that, which needed a lot of HR support, building out the foundation, the documents and the hiring and the recruiting and the training. And so I started doing that with them. There was definitely a point in my life where I had to make a decision. I was a single mom at the time. I was barely getting, picking her up, taking her home, feeding her, bathing her, and then I had to put her to bed. And so I started to become very unhappy or lost internally, where I felt like I wasn't spending a lot of time with her, the time that I would like to spend. So I pitched, a different schedule, and I asked, can I leave at like 3, go pick her up, have my time with her. And then, I'll come back online when I put her to bed and I'll finish up my work. They were not open to that at the time. And so I think one morning I just woke up and I gave a 30 days resignation. And I decided on my drive over there that I was going to do it. And I knew that if I didn't do it that day, I probably wouldn't do it. So I did it. And I figured, I can do this on my own. I can be an HR consultant. I can go I have 30 days to, go pick up some new clients. And so I ended up pitching them. Sorry, for anybody listening, if this story is old, I've said it. I've told this story a lot.
It's new to me. It's really new to me.
Okay.
And I did a ton of research on you. So yeah,
okay.
This is good. I'm loving it.
Okay. So like 2 weeks before, I pitched my services to my employer, and I'm like, you don't have to lose me. I could still do this part. It's just, I'm not going to come to the office all the time. And so I pitched my services. I did a whole number analysis of how much money they would actually save using me instead of backfilling my position and paying, payroll taxes and benefits and all of that. So I pitched it to them. And then about a week before my last day, they signed on.
Yes.
And so I ended up leaving with a full book of business. I didn't really have to, I still had other clients, but I didn't have to go actively look for new clients. And so I did that. And then a couple of my clients went through some pretty big transactions. I had one client go through a private equity round at a valuation of 100 million. And I had another company, a fast casual restaurant, they did a 40% exit at 18 million. And so now I've just, going through that process, I learned how to do the due diligence for transactions. And I started marketing myself as that. If you're a company that you're looking to sell, you're looking to do a capital raise, you probably don't realize how big of a role HR plays in the entire due diligence process, because when a buyer comes on, they make your offer, you go through due diligence, and what they're looking for is liability. How likely is this organization going to be sued by employees? And so they're looking to make sure you have document after document after document for each employee that ever worked for your company, like ever in its history. And so I realized like that we're not talking about that. We talk about the books and the numbers and the profits and EBITDA. Like we're talking about all those things, but nobody's talking about this major part where if the buyer, through the due diligence process, if they see that you are likely to be sued, they will lower the offer, because now they feel like they're going to have to pay out settlements or something like that. So I started marketing myself in that space. I needed to do a capital raise. I was getting really busy. So I did a small capital raise, and established Gameday HR from there.
Wow. So Gameday HR essentially became your firm that you're consulting and offering your services to help people mitigate risk for their organization. I mean,
that's how it starts.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it starts. And then, for our more seasoned clients, we're looking at engagement. The organizations that are, 100 employees more, we because they already have this foundation, most likely, I would say, for them, we're really focusing on engagement. How do we create a happier workplace?
Well, it's crazy. I mean, to your point, like, you were mentioning earlier, you think about this company that was going through either an acquisition or they were getting an investment, but there was all these potential risk with the organization, and we've seen it happen from time to time. And it wasn't enough to kill companies, but it became very close. Like I'm trying to. SoFi was one of them, and I don't know if you ever, you probably keep those in mind. But there was just these blatantly bad management practices that are happening in organizations that are like just running rampant, and no one knows about it because they have a product that's flying off the shelf, but no one knows what's going on internally. What's that?
WeWork was a huge example. Yeah, WeWork was getting sued left. I mean, now we know the story, right? We know how that story ends. But at the time, we didn't know a lot about what was going on financially. But there were employees that had filed lawsuits against them because what they were doing is they were getting fired before they were granted their stock options.
Yeah.
And so they were being sued. It was, multiple executive level employees who went after them and saying they fired me right before I was granted my stock options. And so I wonder, I don't know if I could go back far enough on my LinkedIn, but I basically put my feet in the dirt and said, if they can't prove that they broke company policy, that they underperformed with documentation, and prove that they've had multiple conversations with these employees that they were underperforming, they're going to lose this case. They will be settling that case.
Yeah.
And so that was like it's so interesting because this was way before the real issues had been exposed. But I have it on there, like on LinkedIn, where I said, this company is going to go through a lot of problems because it's already coming from an employee standpoint. So now you're dealing with the investors, real estate, and all of these other things that they were doing, bloating numbers, whatever that looks like. But you can predict how an organization, what the longevity of the organization is going to be by how the employees feel about the organization.
Oh, 100%. And it's a scary thought, but not a lot of people knew it. I mean, the people inside knew it, and they were all, I mean, I don't know if you saw or listened to the podcast around this. There was like a whole, coming up of, and the downfall of that company.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so interesting to hear, and how it just went for so long. I mean, just the textbook HR stuff that you're not supposed to do was just happening on a rampant scale. And I do think that there's a lot of companies that do it, that manage it that way now. So, one of the things, like for me, I worked in corporate America for a really long time. I was at Chase, I was at Time Warner, I was at Wells Fargo. And in fact, I think this might be how you and I initially got connected. I made a comment on Brian Covey's,
About
um,
Wells Fargo.
yeah, about Wells Fargo. You're like, oh my
Hmm.
gosh, and you kind of jumped in, and I was like, and then we, that's where I think then we were on the clubhouses and stuff. So, but it was, so you hear about, so to me, HR, right? HR being involved is more of a policing than it is
Hmm.
the way that it should be used, right? And I'm really fortunate at the company that I'm at now because I have the most legit HR staff that I could have ever, asked for. Like they're truly there to consult and to help and to
Hmm.
mitigate risk. And so, but when I looked at it back then, and you had said something that, around along the lines, and I'm trying to look for it in my notes, but you said something that really resonated. You said, and I'm close to it. You said, I'm going to come up to it. That you got into HR because like nobody ever grows up wanting to be in HR.
Oh, you got that from the True Underdog
That
podcast,
I don't
right?
know. I don't know if that's what it was called, but it
Yeah.
was like no one ever grows up thinking, and that's that initially resonated me because nobody ever grows up thinking they're going to be in mortgage either. But no one grows up thinking they're going to be in HR. But you got an HR to help people. Now go
Hmm.
do it. Now, like do your job on that, right? And
Hmm.
I think a lot of times somehow because you're mitigating risk, that becomes a policing effort. And
Right.
do you see that happening in a lot of major organizations, or where do you see the disconnect is in HR that makes you kind of think that one, it just sucks, or two, that it needs to an overhaul?
Yeah, I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't, give credit to some of the organizations that do HR really well. And it's actually a test like Netflix. It's actually a testament to where they are now today. And how much they cared about, their people and the opinions of their people and making sure everybody had a role in the
Yeah,
success of the organization. So I want to be very clear that there are organizations that do
without
do
a
it
doubt.
very well, including Lone Depot, obviously, because now this is the second time I'm hearing about their the HR department there.
Hmm.
Um, so I think the disconnect is, number one, there is this theory that HR can't be friends with anybody. And so they end up isolating themselves from the people that they are there to serve, essentially. And so they end up, being very like robotic. They don't talk about, they don't hang out with anybody. They don't have conversations with anybody. They don't talk about personal things.
Hmm.
And I think that's the number one mistake. I think number two, HR professionals don't know enough about business.
Hmm.
They don't understand business strategy. Like, can you read a P&L? Can you read a balance sheet? Do you know what these numbers mean? Do you have like a cost versus a budget? Do you know your turnover rate? Do you know like all of these KPIs that really determine like number one where an organization is and where they need to be? I don't know if we have caught up to that in the HR industry. I don't think that we have learned enough about the numbers and about the business side of making decisions. And so that's two. Number three, um, at the end of the day, like I said, you don't. There aren't little girls and little boys saying, "I really want to be in HR when I grow up." You kind of just fall into it, I would say. Um, and so that's really important because if you're in HR because you fell into it and you feel like you can't do anything else, I really encourage you to get the fuck out because you are a detriment to the organization. Now, if you're in HR and it's because you truly like people, all the
Right.
other things can be learned. You can learn how to, read a P&L. You can learn how to strategize and use data to make decisions. You can learn what labor laws are on Google. You can learn how to build a handbook. You can learn all the various paid time off policies. Like all of those things you can learn very easily, actually. But if you like have this unconscious bias toward certain people, if you don't see every single person as perfect, almost like as a perfect person in front of you, and your goal is to make sure that they are happy and succeeding, even if the happiness is to tell them you won't be happy in this organization, it's time for you to move on. Like if
Yes.
you can't do that, you have to find something new. You have to find something, like HR is not for you. And so when I think that there are definitely people out there who, and I make fun of myself in my TEDx video, and I say like, oh, look at this millennial. I did HR for like 3 months, and I went and started like a business in HR. And sure, on paper, I probably did not look qualified. But if you asked every single employee of the organization that I was working for if I was doing a good job or not, I guarantee you 100% of them would say yes, that they were happy in the organization. And it was because I helped facilitate their happiness and help them find success, whether that was recommending people for promotions and then mentoring them as supervisors and walking them through like how to have certain conversations, how to earn respect and be liked, like whatever that looked like. I feel my success came from just truly having a genuine curiosity and a passion for people. All the rest of it, the certificates, the PHRs, the SPHRs, the SHRMs, the bachelor's degrees, like all of that, it doesn't matter, because I know a ton of HR professionals who have their masters in blah, 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 and certifications and all the things, and they still are not great at their job. And so to me, it's just turn what you fell into something that you can really be motivated by and be passionate about, or find something else.
So I got a question for you. So I'm listening to you talk, and you have this insane amount of confidence, and it's a really good quality to have, because when you just know your shit, you know your shit, right? You know you're good at what you do, and you know that you can challenge it, right? Like you go talk to anybody. I'm good at what I do. Where does that come from? And I'm going to take a stab at it. I'm going to answer it before you do, in a way, but and I'm curious about this, because one of the things as I was researching you that resonated with me about your background is that I got the sense of something you said. So I'm going to paraphrase it, is along the way, like you grew up somewhat of a latchkey kid. And I did as well. And so, which is why I think we started working at really early ages and started getting, you had to kind of fend it for yourself. Mm-hmm. And you became a bit of a hustler on how to get things done, and getting it done through people as well. But do you feel like that is why you're where you're at today? Do you think, having to grow up in a way that was different than the way you kind of the way that I'd want to bring up my kids, and like, I don't necessarily think I want my kids working at 14, but do you think that that's changed how you would, that your trajectory in business?
I really don't want to give all of the credit to the fact that my parents were terrible.
Well, I didn't say they were terrible, but
no, they were.
I love my parents.
No, they were. I'm telling you.
Okay.
No, they weren't terrible, but they definitely had other things in mind that they prioritized. And so I don't want to give all of the credit to that, because I know people who had the same type of childhood who didn't, who didn't follow their dreams or chase what they were passionate about. So you can't give credit to all of that. I think what you can give credit to is, okay, you've had this childhood experience, and you struggled, and you were always in survival mode. But also understanding that you are not defined by those circumstances. And so once you have that realization where, yes, I went through all of these things, and from a positive standpoint, I learned, I worked at an early age. I learned how to talk to people, like mature people, and get them to buy into my philosophy and influence people. And like, once you figured out, like, these are Tony Robbins has this quote that I'm not like a huge Tony Robbins fan, but this was the one where he said, like, I am who I am because my mom wasn't who I needed her to be.
Quote,
yeah.
Yes.
So just in that, if you can understand that the positive side, you could put your past behind you, which is way easier said than done. I can admit to that. And you can realize, like, because of these experiences, you can actually make a difference in people who have similar experiences, like
Yes.
people who were neglected, people who didn't have like basic physical needs met. You take on a different view of the world, and you realize, like, yes, I went through these things, but now because I went through these things, I can make a difference because I know how those people feel. I know, like, how to read people. I have a very like, I can go into a situation, like a room, a place, whatever, and I'm just a scanner. I scan the entire place, and that is because of how I grew up. So I can spot, like, okay, that that couple is going to start fighting pretty soon, and that person could be potentially dangerous. And I'm always observing and scanning my entire environment. And so use those skills, like those skills that you had to activate very young and are now matured, and you're probably even expert at those things. Use those skills to become successful instead of using them as a crutch or an excuse of, you weren't handed the right cards. And so no matter what, whether it was a childhood like mine or a childhood like, some of my friends where their parents were very active and very involved, I would say of all of us, we share similar core values, and they're successful in their own right and chasing after the things that they want to do. So I don't want to give it all credit of I'm here today because I had to survive as a kid, but I think I definitely used it. I learned how to use it to my advantage.
I mean, I see it in a lot of people. It's why I asked a question, but it's interesting because you said that you scan a room,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm trying to figure out where that came from, right? And so, like, I remember growing up, I was always walking places by myself, like at a really, really unusually early age, like kindergarten. And I remember my mom always telling me, like, you got to always watch your back, like listen for
Mm-hmm.
footsteps behind you. Like, she was always like, kind of, do you feel like that's where that got embedded in you? Or did you just like, where did the scrappiness come from like scanning a room? Cause that's what like soldiers do. That's what people who are in the military walk in a room and they're scanning. They don't put their back against a wall. Like, and it almost seems like you have that same mentality.
So growing up, I had a babysitter, and the house was, the home in itself, there was like, she was like a grandmother's age, so she was
Mm-hmm.
like around the age as what my grandmother would have been. And her daughter was an alcoholic, her son was violent and did drugs, and so just me, like, coming into the house after school, because I would have to walk over there, it was always, I had to take like a temperature of the house so I know what to expect. And so if I see, like,
Mm-hmm.
she's over here, she's pretty drunk already, and I could see, like, my babysitter, who's her mom, is irritated, and then I can see that, the son has his like two guy friends over, and they're probably gonna like do drugs pretty soon.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I really had to check the temperature of the entire house,
Yeah.
so I knew, okay, what was I going to do? Am I going to leave and go to like a friend's house instead if it's like really aggressive in the house, or am I going to go into like one of the smaller boys' room and kind of hang out there for a while? Like, I just had to know what
process.
Yeah, I had to know what my next move was going to be. And so even when I was younger, I was going to a pool hall to watch the Laker games, and I was like a little kid, like 8, 9 years old, just sitting on one of the chairs. They had like a tiny TV that was like up, like hanging on one of the walls, and all like the bar flies and the smokers and the drug transactions were happening behind me, and I was just like watching the Laker game. And it was because the person working there was like an uncle of one of my classmates, and so he always just like, yeah, come over here and watch the game. Yeah, but I still always knew what was going on, so I was like, is this a potentially dangerous situation for me or not? And I think as I've gotten older, it's probably saved my life a couple of times of seeing, like seeing these situations unfold. So you now know, when I'm exposed to an alcoholic at a young age, I'm exposed to a drug addict at a young age. Like I joke around, but I would watch Cops to find out like what their strategies were to find out if someone was like high or not. Then I would like use them.
Yes,
yeah, I would like use them and like test them out to see if they work. So now as an adult, it's like it's so ingrained into like my DNA at this point that I can determine if somebody used to be a drug addict just by their mannerisms or how they're talking or how they look or how their mouth looks. I can determine if someone smokes pot on a regular basis. I can determine a romantic relationship going on. Right. I can see it. I can see like the interactions and the chemistry.
Like, you better watch out for those two in the.
Yeah. I can predict when a couple is going to stay together or not.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I didn't do a good job of my own, but for other people, like I feel really confident in how people interact with one another with substances in an environment, like the entire behavioral cues that come with that.
It's what's crazy about it is when you think about like you mentioned you're a mom, and how old is your child?
She's 8.
8, right? Can you imagine like her 8-year-old rolling into a bar to watch, whatever it is she watches now, and having to have that sense of like the room. Isn't that crazy? Like, can you imagine her having to do that? Because I can't imagine my kids doing the things I was doing at that age.
No, she doesn't even wipe her own butt well, let alone like be able to scan a room for danger. She's like no danger, like no stranger danger. She'll like go talk to anybody. She doesn't care.
Well, you have an amazing story, and I'm glad we were able to kind of get to that, because I think that I do think it's made you who you are today. I don't think that, like the success, like you just like even the fact that you were like, I have a child, I'm quitting my job and I'm going to figure this out. And I got to just cut the cord to then get to the next step. And that's because you've lived a life of having your back against a wall at some point to be able to know how to maneuver on that and just know like, I'm going to be okay. But I applaud you for sharing that and just being authentic. I'm going to wrap up here real quickly, but I want to just ask you a couple more questions.
Okay.
So, one of the things that I try to share on my show is that the folks like you who come on, I have met because you built a brand on social media. Like I kind of knew you before I knew you. And so, why is that important in today's, in the age that we're living in, to have a digital presence and a digital brand? Because you've leaned into it, and you leaned into it really hard with the podcast. You're on Clubhouses, you're posting amazing content. Why is that important today?
Thank you for the kind words. I do want to preface with that. If I'm going to be 100% honest, it is not that important to have a digital presence. Okay. And I know I may be standing like on a limb by myself here, but at the end of the day, if you are not compelled to share your story or share these conversations that you're having, like if you really don't feel like compelled to do that, I beg you, don't do it. Like, don't do it. Stay
so
away
much bad
from
content
it.
Out there.
Yeah,
There's
like
so
you can definitely like the path to success. It's not one road. There's many different roads, and if like I encourage anybody who is like on the fence about having like a digital presence because it doesn't feel good to them, don't do it. Don't go on there. All you have to do is just put all of that time and energy into a different type of customer acquisition strategy. So I don't want to say that everybody needs to have a digital presence because I don't believe that. I don't believe I needed one until it was time for me when I felt compelled to share my story. And that was last year. I've been in business for 5 years. I barely started doing it last year. And that was because the first 4 years of the business, I really had my head was down, and I was really working on my clients and developing a service model and a product that I knew was going to be a lot more successful than me putting that time into marketing, and my product was shit. So I again, don't fall into these traps of what everybody is saying. So like, number one, the people who are pushing the fact that you need a digital presence the most are digital marketing agencies. How did that happen? You know,
Yeah.
like,
Okay.
remember,
I like
you're
it.
being
Yeah.
sold you're being sold a product. And so, so number one, like, if it doesn't feel right, don't do it yet. If down the line that's in your future to get on social media, then get on it at that time. But if you feel like really weird about it, trust your gut and don't do it yet. You'll know when it's the right time to do it. And that's all I have to say about that.
Well, I do appreciate it. I mean, the reason I'm asking is because you've done really well with it, and has it opened doors for you?
I mean, yes, it has opened doors for me, but it opened doors at a time when I was ready for those doors to be opened. Yes.
So that's it. And I think that's really important to put in there, because you can't rush something, right? If you're not comfortable with it, it has to come at your own speed. And I do think, even me as a leader that's out in the market talking to loan officers saying, build your digital presence, I think that it's refreshing to hear somebody say, look, dude, take a step back when you're ready. Mm-hmm. That's your time.
Agreed. And to be honest, those are the worst clients to work with. The ones that like are forcing to go online, and like, they're going to give you trouble every step of the way because they just don't really want to do it. You know, it's like HR. When, you know, I believed, even in our business, like, you don't chase HR clients. They have to want it. Like, I can't convince you to have an HR department. I won't. I refuse to. Like, if you don't see the value in it, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to waste my time, because you are going to be a pain in my ass the whole way through. I'm going to have to convince you I'm going to have to resell you like the product every single time we have a conversation. And that's exhausting. I'd rather spend that time and go find the clients that are like searching for HR consulting. Those are the ones that I really want to spend my time with, because they're in. They already know that they need the product. Like they're already being sued, and so they need the help like right now.
Yes.
Like, those are the ones we really put our time into. And it's the same thing for anything, for digital marketing, for mortgages, for like, you can't convince people of something. They have to be ready for it. And your job as a company is to find those people, the people who are all ready to buy in.
That's good. I love it. Well, look, I know you were at a press for time, and I want to be respectful of that. But I could talk to you a ton more. So I really, I'm putting up comments as they're coming out, because a lot of people agree with what you're saying. So I really do appreciate you coming on, and so I want to give you some plugs. So if anybody who is listening either goes to Spotify or Apple Podcast, just open up the app, type in HR Sucks, and boom, you got Katrina. And she is legit. What, you're on a couple of other podcasts as well, right? Or
I've been on like other shows, but this is the only podcast that I actually like host myself.
Gotcha.
And we did launch our culture quiz a couple of weeks ago. So highly, encourage everybody who is curious about where their culture is, like where it stands against other companies. Go to gamedayhr.com and click on the culture quiz. It's just 12 questions. It's going to spit out a grade for you of where you are. And then, you'll go into like this series of like what to do next. So go there. You can go to, again, gamedayhr.com. You can find me here. I'm the only Katrina Ghazarian in the world. So you can find me here on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram is @Kat Ghazarian. And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you for joining. And I can't thank you enough. And I hope our paths continue to cross on the digital world. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Take care. I'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.